Hi, good afternoon. My name is Eric Jillard, and I'm responsible for the automotive industry for the World Economic Forum. I joined the forum because I think it's about the most exciting time I can think of in the mobility business, and I'm here to talk to you today about a really exciting project that we're running with the city of Boston that has the objective of advancing the state of autonomous mobility, not just in Boston, but really in cities around the world. The World Economic Forum, many of you may be familiar with it, is the International Organization for Public-Private Cooperation. It provides a unique platform to address some of the world's most challenging issues. It was founded in 1971 by Professor Klaus Schwab as a not-for-profit in Geneva, and the focus is really on being an independent, impartial arbiter and a forum for the world's concerns. We believe that progress happens when you bring the right people together to address issues. Today, we're on the brink of a technological revolution that I think that will fundamentally change the way we live, work, and relate to each other. And in its scope and complexity, we think this transformation will be unlike anything else that we've ever experienced. While we don't yet know how it will unfold, we know that the response to it needs to be integrated and comprehensive, involving stakeholders across the spectrum. So those same forces are really fundamentally transforming mobility as we speak, and we think the forum can play a meaningful role in driving the exploration of autonomous technology with a focus on making cities cleaner and greener. So given our mission, it's not hard to see why the forum would be focused on autonomous mobility. We know that when it comes to, like, for example, road safety, human drivers are responsible for 90% of accidents in the world today, and we think road safety could improve substantially with the adoption of autonomous mobility. Pollution, of course, is another issue. We know that greater efficiency in traffic would also reduce pollution, and we believe that AVs will be, almost by definition, EVs or some other carbon-free mobility solution. And equally important, we think that autonomous mobility can provide a significant increase in access to mobility for people who have been previously sort of underserved by mobility, such as the elderly, the disabled, children, and even the poor. So as part of a multi-year project to explore the future of urban mobility, broadly speaking, we really narrowed in on autonomous mobility. And in order to put that strategy to action with this a pretty comprehensive work group that includes a lot of companies in the mobility space, suppliers, energy companies, financial services companies, government entities, and so forth, we focused in on the city of Boston, and we chose Boston for a number of reasons. Boston's a very progressive administration. There's abundant academic resources. It's got a history of innovative companies there in a real entrepreneurial spirit in Cambridge and Boston. And it's also a place where there's the dynamics of its traffic were interesting to us. There's already a very comprehensive public transport system in town. Then there's regional rail and so forth. And it's also a city that deals with snow and ice. So I think if you're trying to evaluate the potential for autonomous mobility, you need to be able to see how it works in all sort of weather scenarios. So together with Boston, we helped craft the city's mobility strategy, developing a strategy for AVs, and we helped bring forward on-street trials. Working together with a partner, Boston Consulting Group, we created an agent-based simulation that would model the integration of AVs. What would it really look like to bring AVs into city traffic? And we helped get that AV testing started. Nutonomy, who the prior speaker talked about in Singapore, is one of the first, or was the first to start testing autonomous vehicles in Boston as well. We looked at 4 key use studies for autonomous vehicles. The first would be traffic that sort of starts and ends in the downtown core area. We looked at commuting traffic in and out, leisure traffic in and out of the city, and also public transport that complements public transportation. That's driving to and from, for example, the first and last mile solution, if you will. And looking at those different types of traffic, we built a model of downtown Boston. We took the whole, essentially that downtown area and looked at all the traffic that actually happens in that downtown area. Not just vehicle traffic, but looking at cars, taxis, pedestrians, buses. So we were able to comprehensively look at all that traffic, also across all the dimensions of Boston's traffic. And we looked at 4 distinct types of vehicles. We looked at a self-driving personal car. If we were to add a car that would be, just with a single occupant, a self-driving taxi, which might, pick you up and drop you off as it goes around its rounds. We added a ride-sharing self-driving taxi, so a taxi that might pick up multiple people instead of just one, and then also looking at self-driving minibuses, so with a larger capacity, 9 to 15, something like that. And then with those types of vehicles, we looked at what we called one evolutionary scenario and one revolutionary scenario. This is Boston's traffic today. You see it's about 56% public transit inside the city, 33% public personal car, and then about 11% taxi and e-hailing. We looked at a private car, what we called the private car evolution, where we acknowledged that some percentage of that traffic that was on public transport today would migrate toward self-driving taxis, but we know that some people would move towards shared taxis as well. We also looked at what we call the revolutionary scenario, which we envisioned a much more pronounced shift in both private and public transportation toward shared autonomous minibuses. And what we found in both scenarios were a couple of interesting things. One was, of course, a reduction in vehicles on the road because you have more people in shared vehicles. So by definition, you've got fewer vehicles on the road. Average travel time decreased. CO2 emissions decreased even substantially in the sort of robo-transport revolution phase. And we saw a huge diminishment in the need for parking spaces, which is really, of course, interesting to city planners. We did see an increase in the vehicle distance traveled, and that's because you've got a lot of vehicles that are more highly utilized, and they're back in and out of the city more frequently. I'm sorry. So I'm hitting back now. There we go. So going forward, we have 5 additional work packages that we're working on. One is to bring in the topic of urban logistics, which I think is incredibly important because it's not just personal travel going in and out of the cities, of course. There's a lot of goods delivery as well. We also are working to develop some scenarios of what that mobility platform would look like. What would be the actual interface that a customer would use to book that travel, and how would that all work on the back end? We're advancing the AV testing, so continuing to push enhanced testing, also taking into account a conjoint study that we've done looking at customers' inclination toward autonomous vehicles and saying, well, given that, rather than the sort of arbitrary percentages we envisioned in the first round, we're looking at much more specific information on how they might move forward with that. And then I think number 5 here is most interesting for me is, and for the forum, is looking at building out a city network. So that would be a way for us to look at how do we take the lessons we're learning in the city of Boston and share them with other cities, and also how do we make sure that all the learnings that are being developed in some of those most progressive cities that are testing AVs around the world are shared effectively. And what I'll leave you with the last minute I've got or so is some of the key recommendations for cities out of our project work. The first was, we feel it's pretty important that cities should promote the sharing of vehicle fleets and rides. They need to get in the mode of promoting this because the best way to improve traffic flow really is reducing single occupant rides, getting those single occupant cars off the streets. Second, I think we need to recognize that cities should closely link electrification to future mobility efforts. We think that if we look at the benefits you're hoping to accrue, one of them for sure is clean air, and we need to make sure that AVs are also part of the clean air solution. Third, we think there's a real need to experiment. There is no one answer just yet. I think cities need to continuously experiment with different shared mobility models, and they'll find the way forward. Fourth, we think you need to involve the public very early on. I think education is huge. Customers don't necessarily know much about AVs, and they need to really focus on that. And I think there's a lot of cooperation required with car manufacturers, technology providers, and think big. Think big and think about how it exists in with the existing transport system. So I'm sorry I ran over. Thank you very much for your attention, and take care.